I'm Melva, 30 years old now, with a life most would envy. Financial security, my own company, a beautiful home. But 13 years ago, I was sleeping in my car with 2 suitcases after my mum chose her new husband and babies over me. I thought that chapter was closed until last month, when she suddenly reappeared with her hand out. The betrayal felt fresh all over again, like reopening a wound I thought had healed. Before I share how I went from homeless to successful, only to face my mom's shocking demands, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, we were what most people would call a picture-perfect family. My dad worked as an accountant, while mum stayed home with me. Dad was my hero, always patient and kind, teaching me the value of hard work and financial responsibility from an early age. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Melvie," he would say with that warm smile of his. "But if you're smart with what you have, you can make it multiply." Every Sunday we had our special ritual. Dad would take me for ice cream and we would talk about everything and anything. Those were the moments I treasured most. He never treated me like a child, but as someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. When I turned 12, he helped me open my first savings account. I can still remember how proud he looked when I deposited my babysitting money. "This is just the beginning, sweetheart," he said. "Someday you'll understand how important financial independence is, especially for a young woman." I never imagined how prophetic those words would become. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in April when I was 13. I was sitting in math class when the school counselor came to get me. The moment I saw her face, something inside me knew. Dad had been in a car accident on his way to work. A drunk driver had crossed the median. He died on impact. The next few months were a blur of grief. Mum completely shut down. She barely left her bedroom, and I found myself taking care of both of us. I made meals, did laundry, and tried to keep our home functioning while also processing my own grief. At 13, I became the adult in our household overnight. After about 6 months, Mum started to emerge from her grief, but she wasn't the same person. She began going out at night, coming home smelling like alcohol and cigarettes. When I asked where she'd been, she'd snap at me. "I'm allowed to have a life, Melva. I'm still young. I deserve some happiness after everything." I understood she was hurting, but it felt like she had forgotten I was hurting too. I missed my dad terribly, and now it seemed I was losing my mom as well. Then Jason entered the picture. Mum met him at some bar about a year after Dad died. He was 10 years younger than her, with a charming smile that never quite reached his eyes. From the beginning, something about him made me uneasy. The first time she brought him home, he made a big show of being interested in me. "So you're the famous Melva," he said, ruffling my hair like I was 5 instead of 14. "Your mum talks about you all the time." But when Mum left the room to get drinks, his demeanour changed instantly. He looked at me with cold eyes and said, Don't get in the way of your mum's happiness. She deserves better than being stuck with a reminder of her past." I was shocked into silence. By the time Mum returned, Jason was all smiles again, but the message had been received loud and clear. I was an obstacle to their relationship. As their relationship progressed, Mum spent less and less time at home. When she was home, all she talked about was Jason. How funny Jason was, how spontaneous Jason was, how Jason was helping her live again. I tried to be supportive. I really did. I asked questions about him, tried to show interest when she talked about their dates. But the more entrenched he became in our lives, the more I felt pushed to the sidelines. When Jason moved in 6 months later, everything changed again. Suddenly, there were new rules in the house. I had a curfew. I needed to be quieter. My music was too loud. My friends weren't welcome to come over as often because Jason works nights and needs to sleep during the day. The worst part was watching how Jason slowly began to control our finances. Dad had left us with a decent life insurance policy and some savings, but Jason always seemed to have ideas about how that money should be spent. "We should upgrade the kitchen," he'd say, or "that vacation package is a great deal," and Mum would agree to everything. The money that was supposed to secure our future was slowly disappearing. Through it all, I threw myself into school. If home wasn't a refuge anymore, at least I could excel academically. I joined every club I could, stayed late at school for study groups, anything to avoid coming home to the tension and the feeling that I was unwelcome in what used to be my safe place. By the time I was 15, Jason had completely transformed our home. Dad's photographs were relegated to my bedroom. His books were packed away in the attic. It was as if my father had never existed and no one seemed to care but me. My 16th birthday should have been a milestone to celebrate. Instead, it became the beginning of the end of my life as I knew it. Mum had promised to take me out to dinner, just the two of us, like old times. I was excited, thinking maybe we could reconnect. But when I came downstairs dressed for dinner, Jason was sitting at the table too. Before I could hide my disappointment, Mum excitedly announced, "We have amazing news to share on your special day." They were expecting a baby. Mum was 3 months pregnant. I forced a smile and congratulated them, but inside, my heart was sinking. It wasn't that I resented the baby, it was what Jason said next that chilled me. "We'll need to convert your room into a nursery soon," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "You can move your stuff to the basement, it'll be like having your own apartment." Mum didn't even blink at this announcement. When I looked at her for support, she just smiled and squeezed Jason's hand. "Isn't it exciting, Melva? You're going to be a big sister?" The basement was unfinished, cold, and had a persistent mildew smell. Dad had always talked about renovating it, but never got the chance. Now it was being presented as some kind of favor to me. After that night, things moved quickly. Jason hired contractors to convert my bedroom into a nursery, and I was given 2 weekends to move everything to the basement. As I packed up my belongings, I found myself holding onto Dad's old sweater, one of the few things of his I had kept. The tears came unbidden. Around this time, I also started asking questions about my college fund. Dad had been setting money aside for my education since I was born. With college applications starting soon, I wanted to know what schools I could realistically consider. "We've had to make some adjustments to those funds," Mum said vaguely when I brought it up. "With the baby coming, our financial priorities have shifted." "But that money was specifically for my education," I protested. "Dad wanted me to go to college." "Your father isn't here anymore," Jason interjected. "And financial decisions for this family are made by those contributing to it. What do you contribute, Melva?" The question stung like a slap. I was 16, focusing on school as I'd been taught was important. How was I supposed to be a financial contributor? As Mum's pregnancy progressed, she developed complications and was put on bed rest. Somehow this too became my fault. "Your constant questions and attitude are stressing your mother out," Jason accused after a particularly tense discussion about college. "If anything happens to this baby, you'll have to live with that." I began walking on eggshells in my own home, trying to be invisible, trying not to cause any waves. The basement became my sanctuary, despite its flaws. At least there I could be alone with my grief and growing anxiety about the future. When the babies arrived just after my 17th birthday, the surprise of twins seemed to push me even further from Mum's attention. A boy and a girl, Thomas and Lily. They were beautiful, and despite everything, I loved them instantly. But every time I tried to help with them, I was criticized. "You're holding him wrong. You didn't warm the bottle enough. Why can't you keep them from crying? No matter what I did, it wasn't right." Jason would swoop in, take over, and give Mum a look that clearly said, "See, she's useless." The final straw came 3 months after the twins were born. I had been accepted to several colleges, including my dream school with partial scholarships. But without the college fund, even with scholarships, the costs were overwhelming. When I tried one last time to discuss financial options with Mum, Jason exploded. "We're barely sleeping, drowning in medical bills, and all you can think about is yourself," he shouted. "Those fancy colleges are for kids whose parents can afford it. That's not you anymore. Grow up and face reality." "But Dad wanted this for me," I said, tears streaming down my face. "This was his dream too." "Well, he's dead," Jason said coldly. "And we're trying to raise 2 babies on a budget. We can't support your entitlement too." I looked to Mum, expecting her to defend me, to remind Jason that I was her daughter, that I mattered too. Instead, she looked away and said quietly, "Maybe it would be better for everyone if you found somewhere else to live, Melva. There's just too much tension here, and it's not good for the twins." The world stopped. My own mother was choosing her new family over me, was asking me, her 17-year-old daughter, to leave. "You're kicking me out," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You're almost 18, Jason answered for her. "Time to stand on your own 2 feet. Isn't that what your precious father would have wanted, independence?" I looked at Mum one last time, silently begging her to contradict him. She met my eyes briefly, then looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. "You have until the end of the week," she said softly. "Take what you can fit in your car. The rest we'll put in storage until you find a place." 3 days later, I packed 2 suitcases and my backpack into my old Honda Civic, the car Dad had helped me buy with my savings. As I placed the last bag in the trunk, Mum came out to the driveway. For a moment, I thought she might change her mind, might tell me to come back inside, that we'd figure it out together. Instead, she handed me an envelope. "There's $200 inside. It's all we can spare right now. $200 for 17 years of being her daughter." I took the envelope without a word, got into my car, and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. That night, I parked behind a Walmart and cried myself to sleep in the reclined driver's seat, terrified of what would come next and feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The first week of homelessness was a blur of panic and survival instincts. I moved my car to different locations each night, afraid of drawing attention. Walmart parking lot's quiet residential streets, the back corner of my high school parking lot. I used the showers at the school gym before classes started pretending everything was normal. During the day, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I attended classes, smiled at friends, and made excuses about why they couldn't come over anymore. But inside, I was drowning in uncertainty. The $200 Mum had given me wouldn't last long, and I had no idea what would happen when it ran out. After a particularly cold night in my car where I barely slept, I broke down in the school bathroom. Mrs. Lawson, my guidance counsellor, found me there. She had always been kind, but I never expected what came next. "Melva, what's going on?" she asked, sitting beside me on the cold tile floor. "You're one of our brightest students, but your teachers have noticed changes. You seem exhausted, you're wearing the same clothes, and you've been using the school showers. Talk to me." Something about her genuine concern broke through my defences. I told her everything. About Dad, about Jason, about Mum choosing her new family, about sleeping in my car, with no plan beyond high school graduation in a few months. Mrs. Lawson was horrified. "You're still a minor. They can't just throw you out." "I don't want to go back," I admitted. "And I don't want to end up in foster care for a few months just to age out. I just need to figure out how to make it until college." That afternoon, Mrs. Lawson made some calls. By evening, she had arranged for me to stay with her sister-in-law, Mrs. Keaton, who had a spare room and lived alone since her husband passed. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it was a roof over my head, and Mrs. Keaton only asked that I help with household chores in lieu of rent. The next challenge was supporting myself. I found a job at a local cafe working after school and on weekends. The pay was minimum wage, but it covered my basic needs and allowed me to put a little aside. A month later, I added a second job at a grocery store, working evenings after my cafe shift. Between two jobs and maintaining my grades, I was perpetually exhausted, but I was surviving, and that counted for something. The real gut punch came when I finally gathered the courage to call the bank about Dad's college fund. The account had been emptied 8 months earlier. All that remained was $27.14. Mum and Jason had taken it all. When graduation day arrived, I scanned the audience holding onto a sliver of hope that Mum might come, that she might see me in my cap and gown and feel something, anything, that would remind her I was her daughter too. But she wasn't there. Mrs. Lawson and Mrs. Keaton cheered loudly when my name was called, and for a moment their genuine pride eased the ache of my mother's absence. After graduation, Mrs. Lawson helped me apply for every scholarship and grant available. My grades were excellent, and my personal essay about overcoming hardship earned me sympathy points from admissions committees. State University offered me a partial scholarship that would cover about 60% of my tuition. It wasn't my dream school, but it was a path forward. Finding affordable housing near campus was another hurdle. Eventually, I found a tiny studio apartment in a somewhat sketchy neighbourhood. It was barely larger than a decent-sized bedroom with a kitchenette and a bathroom where the shower, toilet and sink were so close together you could wash your hands while showering. But it was mine, and no one could take it away from me. I continued working both jobs that summer, saving every penny I could for textbooks and living expenses. When fall semester started, I dropped the cafe job but kept working 30 hours a week at the grocery store while taking a full course load. Those first months of college were the hardest. I was constantly tired, constantly stressed about money, and constantly behind on readings and assignments. I survived on ramen noodles and free food from campus events. My apartment was so small and depressing that I spent most of my time in the library until it closed at midnight. The loneliness was perhaps the most difficult part. Everyone else seemed to have families supporting them both financially and emotionally. They went home for weekends, received care packages, had parents who called to check on them. I had no one. Then I met Amanda in my Economics 101 class. She noticed I always looked exhausted and offered me her notes when I fell asleep during a lecture. Embarrassed, I tried to decline, but she insisted. "We all need help sometimes," she said simply. No strings attached. Amanda became my first real friend in college. She didn't pity me when I eventually shared my story, just listened and then said, "Well, their loss is our gain. You're amazing and I'm glad you're here." For the first time since Dad died, I felt like someone saw me, the real me, not as a burden or an obstacle or a responsibility, but as a person worthy of friendship and respect. It was a small thing perhaps, but it was the beginning of rebuilding, not just my life, but my sense of self-worth. My second year of college brought unexpected changes. After struggling through general education requirements, my freshman year, I finally got to take classes in my chosen major, finance. It was like something clicked into place. The concepts came naturally to me, reminding me of those Sunday conversations with Dad about making money work for you. Professor Harrington noticed my aptitude in his investment strategies course. After I aced his midterm with the highest score in the class, he asked me to stay after. "You have a natural talent for this," he said, studying me with interest. "But your circumstances are holding you back. You're working too many hours at that grocery store to fully apply yourself here." I was surprised he knew about my job. "I don't have much choice, sir. I'm on my own." He nodded thoughtfully. "I have a proposition for you. I consult for Westfield Financial part-time. They're looking for interns who can work 15 hours a week for actual pay, not just experience. It's more than you'd make for the same hours at the grocery store, and it would give you relevant experience. Would you be interested?" It felt like the first real break since Mrs. Lawson had helped me find housing. I reduced my hours at the grocery store and started at Westfield Financial the following week. The work was challenging but fascinating, and I soaked up everything I could learn like a sponge. By the end of junior year, Westfield offered me a part-time position with even better pay and flexible hours around my class schedule. For the first time, I could afford to take a full course load without working myself to complete exhaustion. I graduated summa cum laude with Professor Harrington and Amanda cheering in the audience. Westfield Financial immediately offered me a full-time position as a junior analyst. The salary was modest by finance standards, but felt like a fortune to someone who had been counting pennies for ramen. My first major splurge was moving to a real apartment, one with a separate bedroom and a kitchen where I could actually cook. I filled it with second-hand furniture that I lovingly restored on weekends, creating the first place that truly felt like home since I'd been kicked out. Professor Harrington continued to mentor me, teaching me about personal investing beyond what I learned at work. "Always pay yourself first," he advised. 10% of every paycheck goes to investments before anything else. I followed his advice religiously, living well below my means even as my salary increased. By 25, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small condominium. Walking through the empty space after closing, I called Amanda in tears. "I own something," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "Something that's completely mine that no one can take away." Amanda understood the significance. "I'm coming over with champagne and pizza. We're celebrating tonight." My career continued to advance as I built a reputation for creative investment strategies and exceptional client service. By 26, I was managing my own small client portfolio at Westfield and had started taking night classes for my MBA. It was during one of these classes that I had the idea for my side business. Many of my classmates were struggling with basic financial literacy things that seemed obvious to me, but were mysteries to them. I started offering informal financial coaching sessions, helping people understand budgeting, debt management, and basic investing. Word spread, and soon I was spending weekends meeting with people who needed financial guidance. I charged affordable rates and genuinely enjoyed helping others take control of their finances. 6 months in, I created a website and officially established Compass Financial Coaching as a legitimate side business. To my surprise, Compass took off. People responded to my straightforward approach and personal story of overcoming financial obstacles. Within a year, I was making almost as much from Compass as from my day job. By 28, I made the leap to running Compass full-time, expanding services to include workshops and online courses. Financial success brought security, but emotional healing was a separate journey. At Amanda's gentle insistence, I finally started seeing a therapist to address the abandonment trauma from my family. Dr. Winters helped me understand that my mother's choices weren't my fault. "Some people are simply not equipped to be the parents their children need," she explained. "Your mother's failure was hers, not yours." Those therapy sessions were painful but necessary. I cried for the teenager who had been discarded, for the young woman who had to fight so hard for everything, for the little girl who just wanted her mom to choose her. Dating proved challenging. I was fiercely independent sometimes to a fault, and terrified of depending on anyone who might leave. My first serious relationship ended after a year when Paul grew frustrated with my emotional walls. "It's like you're always waiting for me to hurt you," he said during our breakup conversation. "I can't spend my life trying to prove I'm not your mother." His words, though painful, were another step in my healing journey. I didn't want to spend my life expecting betrayal around every corner either. By my 30th birthday, I had built a life that exceeded any expectations I could have had. That night in my car 13 years earlier, Compass Financial Coaching had grown into a respected firm with 5 employees. I owned a beautiful townhouse in a good neighborhood. I had a small but loyal circle of friends who had become my chosen family. I was financially secure, professionally successful, and working through my emotional baggage, one therapy session at a time. I had no contact with my mother or Jason in all those years, not even a birthday card or a text message. I had looked up the twins online, occasionally curious about the half-siblings I barely knew. They would be teenagers now. I hoped they were happy even as I maintained my distance from the family that had discarded me. Then on an ordinary Tuesday last spring, an email arrived that would reopen wounds I thought had finally scarred over. The day started like any other. I was reviewing client portfolios in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Melva, you have an email flagged as priority from someone named Caroline Wright. Should I schedule a call back?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Caroline Wright, my mother. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll handle it. Thank you." With trembling hands, I opened the email. Subject: Catching up, Melva. It's been too long since we've spoken. I came across your company website and was so proud to see how well you're doing. The twins are graduating high school next month and talk about college constantly. It made me think of you and wonder how you are. Perhaps we could get coffee sometime and catch up, Mom. No apology, no acknowledgement of kicking me out, no recognition of 13 years of silence. Just, "It's been too long," as if we'd had some minor disagreement instead of her choosing her new family over her daughter. I closed the email without responding and went through the motions of my workday, but my mind was elsewhere. That night I called Amanda, who had witnessed the aftermath of my family's betrayal firsthand. "She has some nerve," Amanda said after I read her the email. "After all this time, she just casually reaches out like nothing happened. What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I decided. Responding would only open old wounds. She made her choice years ago. But 3 days later, another email arrived. Subject: financial advice. Melva, I was hoping to hear back from you. The twins are both looking at colleges, and I remembered how financially savvy you always were, even as a teenager. Thomas is interested in engineering, and Lily wants to study medicine. With your financial expertise, I thought you might have advice on how we should approach funding their education. Coffee soon? Mum, the real purpose emerged. She hadn't reached out because she missed me or regretted her choices. She wanted financial advice for the children she had kept, the children she hadn't thrown away. I didn't respond to this email either, but it haunted me. I mentioned it during my next therapy session with Dr. Winters. "This pattern is unfortunately common," she said. "Parents who have been absent often reappear when they need something, particularly financial support. How does her request make you feel?" "Angry," I admitted. "Used. And somehow, despite everything, there's still this tiny part of me that wants her approval, that's momentarily pleased she noticed my success before remembering why we're estranged in the first place." Dr. Winters nodded. "Those conflicting feelings are normal. The child who wanted her mother's love still exists within you, alongside the adult who recognizes the unhealthy dynamics." A week later, my office phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Compass Financial, this is Melva speaking." Melva finally, "It's Mom." Her voice, so familiar yet distant, sent a shock through my system. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Melva, are you there?" "I'm here," I said, my professional voice taking over. "What can I do for you?" "Well, I was hoping we could meet in person, but since you haven't responded to my emails, I thought I'd call. The twins are applying to colleges and we need some financial guidance. Jason hasn't been great with money, and college is so expensive nowadays. Since you're doing so well with your company, I thought perhaps you could help your siblings out." There it was, not even pretending anymore. She wanted my money. "What exactly are you asking, Caroline?" I used her first name deliberately. She paused, clearly thrown by my formality. "Well, they're your brother and sister, Melva. Family helps family. We were thinking you might want to contribute to their college funds. They're such bright kids and they deserve the best education. Like I deserved, I couldn't help asking. What happened to Dad's college fund for me, the one you and Jason emptied? Another pause. That was a complicated time, Melva. We had 2 babies and medical bills. We did what we had to do, including kicking out your 17-year-old daughter. She sighed as if I was being unreasonable. You were almost an adult anyway, and you were causing so much tension in the house. It wasn't good for the babies. Besides, you've obviously done well for yourself, so it all worked out. The casual dismissal of the trauma she had caused me, the hardship I had endured, ignited a fury I didn't know I still harbored. It worked out no thanks to you, I said, my voice shaking. Do you have any idea what it was like? Sleeping in my car, working 2 jobs while trying to finish high school, having no one at my graduation, struggling through college without a penny of support from my family. Do you even care? That's ancient history, Melva, she said dismissively. Everyone has hardships. The point is you overcame them, and now you're in a position to help your siblings avoid similar struggles. Isn't that what you would want? For them to have an easier path? You don't get to use my success as a justification for abandoning me, I said. And you certainly don't get to use it as an ATM for the children you chose to keep. I'm your mother, Melva. You owe me some respect. You stopped being my mother the day you chose Jason over me, the day you kicked out your grieving daughter who had just lost her father. You don't get to reclaim that title now that you want something from me. The conversation devolved from there. Mum cycling between guilt trips, appeals to family obligation, and finally anger when she realized I wasn't going to write a check. I hung up when she started shouting, then sat at my desk, shaking with adrenaline and repressed tears. That night, I had my first panic attack in years. Sitting on my bathroom floor, struggling to breathe, I felt like that terrified 17-year-old again, alone and discarded. All the success, all the healing seemed to evaporate in the face of my mother's callous reappearance in my life. I thought the phone call would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, my assistant buzzed my office intercom with panic in her voice. Melva, there's a couple here demanding to see you. They don't have an appointment and the man is getting aggressive. Should I call security? Before I could answer, I heard a commotion outside my office door. Then it burst open, revealing the last 2 people I wanted to see. My mother, older but recognizable, and Jason, now balding and heavier but with the same cold eyes. There she is, Jason announced loudly. The big financial success who won't even help her own family. My mother at least had the decency to look embarrassed by his behavior. Jason, please. Let's talk to her civilly. I stood maintaining the desk as a barrier between us. You need to leave. This is my workplace and you're causing a scene. We'll leave when you agree to help your brother and sister, Jason insisted. They're waiting in the car. Did you know they've never even met their big sister? The one who abandoned the family? The accusation hit like a slap. I abandoned the family. You kicked me out when I was 17. You were always difficult, Jason retorted. Always making your mother choose between you and her happiness, just like you're doing now. My assistant appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. Security is on their way, Melva. Should I call the police too? That won't be necessary, I said, maintaining my composure through sheer will. We're going to take this conversation elsewhere. I'll be back in an hour. I grabbed my purse and led them out of my office, unwilling to continue this confrontation in front of my employees. We walked in tense silence to a cafe down the street. A blue sedan was parked outside, and as we approached, I saw 2 teenagers in the back seat, my half-siblings. I'd seen photos online, but it was different seeing them in person. Thomas looked so much like our father, it made my heart ache. Lily had Mum's features, but seemed to have none of her softness. At Jason's gesture, they got out of the car and joined us inside the cafe. Up close, they looked nervous and confused. Thomas, Lily, this is your sister Melva, Mum said with forced cheerfulness. The one I told you about. Thomas extended his hand awkwardly. Nice to meet you. Mum said you've been too busy with your career to keep in touch. I felt a fresh wave of anger at the lies they'd been told. That's not exactly accurate, but it's nice to meet you both. We sat at a corner table, an uncomfortable family reunion, 13 years in the making. The twins were clearly uncomfortable, casting questioning glances at each other. Melva has her own financial company, Mum told them. She's very successful. And she's going to help with your college funds, Jason added, staring at me with challenge in his eyes. I haven't agreed to that, I said quietly. Family helps family, Jason insisted, his voice rising. You can spare some of your fortune for your brother and sister. Like you spared Dad's insurance money for me, I countered. or my college fund? The twins looked confused. Lily spoke up for the first time. What college fund? Nothing for you to worry about, Mum said quickly. Adult business. No, I think they should know, I said. They should know that our father left money specifically for my education money that you and Jason spent. They should know that you kicked me out of the house when I was 17, barely older than they are now. They should know that I had to sleep in my car, work multiple jobs and fight for every opportunity while you pretended I didn't exist for 13 years until you found out I had money you could use. The twins' expressions shifted from confusion to shock. Thomas looked at our mother. Is that true? You kicked her out. It was a complicated situation, Mum began defensively. She was making life impossible, Jason interrupted. Always causing drama, always making your mother cry. We had newborn twins and no space for her teenage tantrums. I was grieving my father, I said evenly, and questioning why the money he left for my future was disappearing. That wasn't a tantrum, it was a daughter trying to honor her father's wishes. You abandoned this family, Jason said, pointing his finger at me, and now you owe them. I owe them nothing, I replied, my voice steady, despite the emotions churning inside. I didn't abandon anyone. I was thrown away. Jason's face reddened with anger. You ungrateful little... That's enough. I cut him off, standing up. I'm not doing this here. If you ever come to my office again, I will call the police. Jason stood too, looming over me. You think you're better than us now with your fancy office and your money? You're nothing without family. Nothing. His voice had risen to a shout, drawing stares from other patrons. The cafe manager approached our table. Is everything okay here? No, I said. These people were just leaving. We're not going anywhere until you agree to help your siblings. Jason insisted, his hand grabbing my arm. The manager looked alarmed. Sir, you need to let go of her now or I'm calling security. Jason's grip tightened momentarily before he released me with a shove. This isn't over, he threatened. The manager called security anyway, and they escorted Jason and my mother out. The twins, looking mortified, followed silently. As they were leaving, I caught Lily's eye. She mouthed, I'm sorry, before Jason ushered her through the door. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The manager brought me a glass of water and asked if I needed anything else. I shook my head, thanking him for his intervention. 10 minutes later, as I was preparing to leave, the cafe door opened again. Thomas and Lily slipped in without our parents. Can we talk? Thomas asked hesitantly. Just for a minute. I nodded and they sat across from me. We didn't know, Lily said immediately. Mum always told us you left because you didn't want to be part of our family, that you resented us for taking attention away from you. That's not what happened, I said gently. I never even got to know you. You were babies when I was kicked out. But why would they lie? Thomas asked, confusion evident in his eyes, so like our father's. People rewrite history to justify their actions, I explained. It's easier to say I abandoned the family than admit they abandoned me. We're applying to colleges, Lily said, changing the subject slightly. Mum and Dad said they can't afford it, that they spent everything on raising us. They said, you're our only hope. The manipulation was so transparent, it hurt. They were using these kids as pawns, just like they'd used Dad's memory against me years ago. I can't just write a check, I said carefully. Not after everything that's happened, but I can offer you something else. Guidance, mentorship, help navigating financial aid scholarships, maybe even part-time work at my company if you're interested. I won't let you struggle like I did, but I also won't enable the people who threw me away. They exchanged looks, communicating silently as twins often do. We should go, Thomas said finally. They'll be looking for us. But can we contact you somehow, without them knowing? I gave them my business card with my personal cell number written on the back. Anytime, I said. For what it's worth, I would have liked to know my siblings. They left, quickly disappearing before our parents could spot them. I sat there for a long time afterward, processing the surreal confrontation and the brief connection with the siblings I never knew. That night, I called Dr. Winters and scheduled an emergency session. The encounter had ripped open old wounds, but strangely meeting the twins had created a new possibility I hadn't considered. Perhaps I couldn't have a relationship with the mother who discarded me, but maybe I could have some connection with my father's other children who were innocent in all of this. The weeks following the confrontation were emotionally turbulent. I increased my therapy sessions and leaned heavily on my support system. Amanda came over with wine and takeout several times, letting me process my feelings about the unexpected family reunion. The audacity, she kept saying. to show up at your workplace demanding money after all these years? The twins texted me a few days after our meeting. They were cautious at first, clearly torn between the parents who raised them and the new narrative they were trying to process. I didn't push, just answered their questions honestly when they asked about the past. Lily, did you really sleep in your car? Me, for almost 3 weeks before my guidance counselor found out and helped me. Thomas, why didn't you fight to stay? We were just babies. Me, I was 17 and scared, and your parents made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore. It was strange building a relationship through text messages with siblings I barely knew existed for most of my life. But there was something healing about it too, a connection to my father through these kids who shared his blood. A month after the cafe confrontation, I received another angry email from Jason demanding to know why I was poisoning the twins' minds against their parents. I didn't respond, but I warned Thomas and Lily to be careful about our communications. 2 weeks later, they asked if we could meet in person somewhere private. I suggested my home, and they agreed to come on a Saturday when they told their parents they were at the library studying. When they arrived, they seemed nervous, but determined. Thomas spoke first. We found some old documents in the attic, he said, pulling a folder from his backpack. We were looking for our birth certificates for college applications, and we found this box of papers. He handed me the folder. Inside were bank statements for a 529 college savings plan in my name, showing regular deposits from the time I was born until my father died. The final statement, dated a year after his death, showed a withdrawal of the entire balance, nearly $80,000. There was also this, Lily added, handing me a sealed envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter Dad had written to be given to me on my high school graduation day, expressing his pride and outlining his financial plans for my education. He had been planning for my future since before I could walk. They lied to us about everything, Thomas said quietly. Not just about you, but about money too. They told us they'd been saving for our college since we were born, but we couldn't find any accounts. And last week I overheard them talking about taking out a second mortgage on the house. I looked at these teenagers so close to the age I was when I was cast out and felt a surge of protectiveness. They deserved better than to be used as emotional pawns in our parents' manipulative games. I want to help you, I said carefully. Not because of any obligation to them, but because you're my siblings and you deserve a chance at education without crushing debt. But I need to do it in a way that doesn't reward their behavior or put you in the middle. After much discussion, I decided to establish an educational trust for each of them with strict conditions. The money could only be used for tuition books and housing paid directly to their schools. They would need to maintain certain grades, and most importantly, our parents would have no access to or control over the funds. This isn't just about money, I explained to them. It's about breaking cycles. Our parents tried to use you to manipulate me, just like they've manipulated both of you with lies about the past. I want to help you become independent, so you're never in a position where someone can control you through financial means. Over the following weeks, I worked with my attorney to set up the trusts while maintaining regular contact with the twins. They started spending more time at my home, getting to know me and learning about the father they never had the chance to meet. He would have loved you both so much. I told them, showing them old photographs. He was so excited when I was born. I can only imagine how thrilled he would have been to have you too. As the twins prepared for college, I helped them with applications and financial planning beyond what the trusts would cover. I also set firm boundaries with our mother and Jason, communicating only through my attorney regarding the educational trusts, and making it clear that any attempt to access those funds would result in their immediate termination. Mum tried calling several times, leaving voicemails that oscillated between gratitude for helping the twins and resentment that I was controlling the situation and turning her children against her. I saved the messages but rarely responded, maintaining the emotional distance that protected my hard-won peace. The most challenging part was helping the twins navigate their changing perspective on their parents. They loved Mum and Jason, who had raised them, but were grappling with the revelation that these same parents had discarded their older sister and lied about it for years. You can love them and still recognize their flaws. I advised during one difficult conversation. People are complicated. They can be good parents to you and still have done terrible things to me. Both realities can exist simultaneously. Working through these issues with the twins prompted more healing in my own journey. As I helped them process their feelings, I found myself processing mine as well, finding a new perspective on old wounds. In therapy, Dr. Winters noted the change. "You're speaking about your mother with more nuance now," she observed. "Less raw anger, more understanding of her limitations as a person." "Understanding doesn't mean excusing," I clarified. "I understand that she chose what seemed easier in the moment, choosing her new husband and babies over her difficult, grieving teenager. I understand that acknowledging what she did to me would require facing her own failure as a mother. But understanding doesn't erase the damage or obligate me to subject myself to more harm." "That's a profound insight," Dr. Winters acknowledged. "Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation." And that was the revelation that finally brought me peace. I could forgive my mother for my own sake, release the burning anger that had occasionally flared up even years later. But forgiveness didn't mean I had to welcome her back into my life or pretend the abandonment never happened. It meant I could stop letting it define me or my future relationships. The foundation I established to help young people in situations similar to mine became another source of healing. Compass Youth Foundation provided emergency housing, educational support and mentorship to teenagers who found themselves without family support. Each young person we helped felt like reclaiming a piece of my own stolen youth, transforming that pain into purpose. Thomas and Lily graduated high school that spring. I sat in the audience cheering for them as Mrs. Lawson and Mrs. Keaton had once cheered for me. Mum and Jason sat several rows away, our mutual acknowledgement limited to tense nods. After the ceremony, Thomas and Lily hugged me before rejoining their parents. It wasn't a perfect resolution, this fragmented family with its complicated dynamics. But it was a beginning of sorts, a new chapter that honoured the past without being imprisoned by it. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the terrified 17-year-old girl sleeping in her car, certain her life was over before it had truly begun. I wished I could tell her that the abandonment that seemed like an ending would eventually lead to strength she couldn't imagine, that the girl who wasn't wanted would build a life so full of purpose and love that the rejection would someday be just a chapter in her story, not the whole book. The journey from that car to my current life hadn't been easy. There were no shortcuts through grief, no way to avoid the hard work of healing. But standing on the other side, I could finally see that being discarded had forced me to discover my own worth, to build a foundation no one could ever take away from me again. True family, I had learned, wasn't always about blood. It was about who stayed when things got difficult, who celebrated your victories and held you through defeats. My chosen family had taught me that love shouldn't come with conditions or be withdrawn as punishment. Real love stayed supported and respected boundaries. With that knowledge firmly in my heart, I was finally free to move forward, carrying the lessons, but leaving behind the pain. The cycle of abandonment that had defined my mother's parenting had ended with me. And in that ending was the most powerful beginning of all. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone who should have loved you let you down? Share your story in the comments below. Remember that your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into.